For folks who are just joining, we're going to get started. We're going to get started right now. It's 7:02. So welcome everybody to this virtual community conversation about youth suicide prevention. I really appreciate everybody who's attending and also to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As we get started, just wanted to share some kind of housekeeping information. So if somebody could just give me a thumbs up that they can see that, that would be great. So we do have Spanish interpretation is available. Please, right here are the instructions in Spanish. So if you are looking for interpretation, just click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, select English to Spanish, and then it'll be about 80% of the volume will be Spanish, but you'll also be able to hear the English as well. And so you can click on mute original audio if you only want to hear the Spanish version of that. And so before we get started on the webinar, so anytime we're having a conversation or a training about suicide prevention, we just want to let folks know that sometimes when we're talking about suicide, it can bring up past experiences that we have had or that people in our life have had around suicide. And so if at any point in time during this conversation, you need additional support, these are two numbers that are available to you 24/7. So we have our local crisis line here in Nevada County. They're familiar with local resources, 530-265-5811. We also have the National Lifeline, which as of July switched over to 988. So much easier to remember. And you can reach the Spanish Lifeline by pressing 2 when you call 988. We also have the crisis text line as well. You can text HOME to 741-741, or you can text AYUDA to 741-741 for help in Spanish. So as you have probably noticed, when you joined Zoom, it said that this presentation is being recorded. We are recording it. The hope is that for all of you who are able to be here today, to be able to share the content and the information that we cover with as broad an audience as possible. We have some real experts in suicide prevention and supporting young people with their mental health here on the panel. And so really want to be able to share that message with as many people as possible. You may notice I'm talking a little bit more slowly, at least the people who know me will know that I'm talking a little bit more slowly than usual. And that is because we do have simultaneous interpretation happening. And so just want to give a huge shout out to Reina Sanchez and Ellie Christensen, who are going to be our interpreters for this evening. Really appreciate them. They in and of themselves are incredible resources for the community's mental health and suicide prevention, and both are trained in Know the Signs, which is a suicide prevention training. And then finally, the last thing that I'll share is that we have the ability to do anonymous questions and answers. So there's a couple ways to do that. The first one would be just to click on the Q&A that's there down at the bottom. And when you click on that, there's that little blue check mark right there where you can click on Send Anonymously. So everybody who's attending here today can see all of those questions. So if you want to send a question anonymously, just check that blue mark before you hit send to that question. But please feel free to send in as many questions as you can. Those are some of the biggest learning moments that we have during these conversations is when we are responding to questions that the community has. And the other way to do that, you can also send a message through the chat. So you can send it to everyone, but people will see who's sending that question. Or you can send it directly to me or to the hosts and panelists, and that will only be visible to the hosts and panelists. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing that piece of it. Now we're going to get started with just introducing our fantastic panel that we have right here. My name is Toby Gavon. I'm not part of the fantastic panel, but my name is Toby Gavon. I'm the Health and Wellness Program Manager with Nevada County Public Health, formerly the Suicide Prevention Coordinator. And so I'm just going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. I will kind of call you out based on where you are on my screen. So just so that we can go in a somewhat orderly fashion. And if you could just share your name, the organization you work for, and then just a very brief description of what you do. So with that being said, Molly, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, good evening. My name is Molly Harrison, and I'm a school psychologist. I work for the Nevada County Charter Services Authority, and I'm primarily based at Forest Charter School in Nevada City. My role is to support students with disabilities, to identify them, and to support teachers and families. And I serve on the Nevada County Suicide Prevention Task Force.
Thank you so much, Molly. Julianne, you're up next on my screen.
Hello, I'm Julianne Henry, and I'm the Student Assistance Program Coordinator with Nevada Joint Union High School District. So I provide direct mental health services to students, as well as supervising the STARS Student Assistance Program and linking students with other community resources, such as children's behavioral health and private mental health providers in our community. Sorry, it's hard to go slow.
That's all right. You guys are doing a great job of modeling it. And I'm just going to share some of those suicide prevention resources that I mentioned at the beginning in the chat there. Lena, you are next up on my screen.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Lena Yord, and I am with Sierra Mental Wellness Group. I am the Youth Mobile Crisis Specialist in Nevada County. So I right now I provide mental health assessments, 5150 assessments, resourcing, and connecting with community partners. The population I serve is youth up to the age of 25. Awesome.
Thank you, Lena. A fantastic resource that we now have available in the community. Curtis, I have you up next.
Thanks, Toby. Yeah, I'm Curtis McMullen, and I'm a clinical supervisor at Children's Behavioral Health. I wear a lot of different hats there, but pertaining to a lot of our discussion tonight, I help kind of co-lead and support a Nevada County emergency response team. And so we respond to schools when there's a tragedy and anywhere else in the community and even outside the community. I also have worked on the remote crisis team, I think since 2000. And I also do the postvention. So we have prevention, which tries to support community members in preventing self-harm or suicide. And then there's a postvention. So it's after something like that has happened, and I will step in and try to support the families and community and friends.
Great. Thanks so much, Curtis, for being here. Joy, you are up next.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Joy Nocerino. I work at Lyman Gilmore Middle School, and I am the school counselor there. And if I tried to explain my role, we would be here for a very long time. So I can email it to you if you want. Just let me know. But I support everyone at Gilmore.
Great. Thanks for being here, Joy. School counselors do everything. Jasmine, you are up next on my list.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jasmine Bro with Health and Human Services for Placer and Nevada County. So I support all health and human services related programming in the Tahoe-Truckee region, which includes a big portion of behavioral health, social services, and public health programming. And I'm also part of the Tahoe-Truckee Suicide Prevention Coalition.
And as you'll see, I'm posting some key resources as we go through so that folks have access to that. Kim, you are up next.
Hi, my name is Kim Bradley. I'm the Wellness Manager for the Tahoe-Truckee Unified School District. I support all of our wellness, mental health, and social emotional learning for our students, K through 12. In particular, we have wellness centers in our middle school and high school, and we connect students to therapists, social workers, and many of our community resources. I, like Jasmine, I'm also a member of the Tahoe-Truckee Suicide Prevention Coalition.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Kim. And Emily, you are up.
Hi, I'm Emily Gallup, and I am a therapist working currently at Forest Charter School and Bitney High School.
Great. Thank you all so much for being here, and to everybody who's attending. Really appreciate you all being here. We're actually going to start off the evening with a little bit of a short video. It's about a 3.5 minute long video, and it kind of covers a lot of what we're going to be talking tonight about. So about knowing the signs, what are the warning signs for suicide, how do we reach out if we see those warning signs, and then what are some resources that we have available to help. So I am going to share my screen once again and share sound, and there should be Spanish subtitles on this. Can folks confirm that they can see that just with a thumbs up?
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual...
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
Or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleeping too much.
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
Acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late.
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
Or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed.
Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said something.
I wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes.
Well, here's what you don't say.
That's crazy.
Don't be such a drama queen.
You're making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over.
That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help?
We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
A lot of people think about killing themselves. Adults and kids. Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead.
I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself. Take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself.
Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to.
Someone he trusts. Make a list together right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
In your kid's life.
All right. So one of the reasons I love that video is because it does a really good job. Oop. Let me just, it kept going on my screen. So one of the reasons I love that video is because it really does a pretty good job of talking us through some of the major things we're going to cover, from the warning signs to how to ask, and then also what we're going to be sharing a lot of is resources. And so I just wanted to kind of open it up to the panel and see kind of that video has a lot in there. Are there particular things that kind of strike you, having done this work before, that you think is important for parents, guardians, and people who work with young folks to know or to kind of take away from that? And I'll open it up. So whoever's feeling moved, please weigh in.
Well, I'll jump in real quick. I think Julian is about to say something too. I like the idea that one of the points that the video makes pretty strongly is kind of speak or ask the unspeakable, like bring it up, talk about suicide, talk about those thoughts and those feelings. And I think as a parent myself, and I would imagine other parents and just any kind of role of caregiver, there's a thought of, well, if I bring it up, it's going to plant a seed. Maybe they're not thinking about it, and now they will. And a lot of the studies indicate that it's just not true. That what Toby said was a really good point, is it provides a sense of care and that they matter and that they're important. So that moved me. It always does when I see teachings and coaching and videos about point blank ask the child or the teenager or the adult, hey, you're not yourself. Are you thinking about harming yourself or ending your life, killing yourself, anything like that? Is any of that going on for you?
Great, thanks so much, Curtis. Anything else from that video that jumped out at folks?
Yeah, I think when I talk to kids at school, and we're 5th through 8th there, they'll tell me that they'll tell their parents they're just feeling really bad and really depressed and super sad. And a lot of the parents dismiss it as their age and say it's because you're a teenager and you're going through the changes and this is totally normal. So they feel pretty dismissed and not heard and supported. So I like that video gave some verbiage to use, and it's not about trying to fix it. It's just saying, I'm here for you and what do we need to do? And I'm by your side. And I really appreciate that language.
Great. Thanks so much, Joy. Anyone else?
I was really impressed that they touch on everything that's important. That video is really quite amazing and worth watching several times if you have a teenager who's dealing with strong feelings or depression or anxiety. It's just a fantastic video. Every tool they mention is important. It really is.
And I'm posting the link to that video just in case anybody who's on wants to have access to that. Anything else that folks found particularly compelling or wanted to highlight?
Hi, it's Xylem.
Hey, Xylem.
later
Sorry
on
about the panelist
panels,
link.
technical difficulties, but I'm from What's Up Wellness, and we do mental health screenings with local high schoolers. And something that really strikes me about the video is that it is from the voice of teenagers, because sometimes we have teens who aren't necessarily having those feelings themselves, but they're hearing things from their friends and they're not sure what to be worried about or what to do. So I think it's a really great video in that regard, that it's coming from young voices.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Molly. I almost called you Molly because your name right now says Molly Xylem, but thank you and welcome, and sorry for the technical difficulties there. Anything else folks wanted to highlight from that video?
I think one piece that stood out for me is the idea that somehow these thoughts or expressions of these thoughts are looking for attention, right? I think that that's it's a common response for understandable reasons that parents or loved ones have to a topic that is such a heavy one. And what I like to communicate with families when that is sort of on the table, are they just looking for attention, is that even if that is the case, even these are cries for help, looking for attention, it points to a deeper unmet need that needs to be looked at and needs to be given attention to. So I would encourage, family members, parents, guardians, anybody that comes into contact with somebody that they feel like is just looking for attention, there's still something there to explore.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other reactions to it? All right. Well, I want to touch on something that a couple of you mentioned. So, one of the questions that we often get during trainings that we're doing is, how do I tell what's quote unquote typical teen behavior, versus warning signs that a teen might be struggling with thoughts of suicide or struggling with their mental health. So how do we, what signs do we look for, to try to distinguish those things?
I think it's important to differentiate between sadness and depression. They're related, but in my mind, depression is a deeper, darker sadness that goes on for a long period of time and doesn't necessarily have a cause. Sometimes it originates internally, right? Like something with your biochemistry is off. And I think that when you suspect that somebody is more in the depression category than just the sadness category, that's when you need to be really concerned about suicide. Because my understanding is that most of the people who do think about or attempt suicide are struggling with depression, not sadness, not grief, but depression.
Great, thank you, Emily. Any other things that can kind of help us differentiate there?
Well, I think there's a focus that should be placed on if someone comes across or is acting helpless or hopeless, and how that can look is, like the video was saying, the things they used to like to do, they just have no interest in any longer. And it can be also getting rid of some important things that are important to them. I also would look at someone who is doing kind of the opposite of what they normally do. So if they normally sleep a lot, now they're not sleeping at all, or if they normally eat a lot and now they're not eating at all, those are pretty big differences. So I would try to look at it I look at it like on a scale, like what do they used to do and what are they doing now? A lot of the teenagers that go through different emotions and feelings, which is pretty normal, a lot of them still do what they like to do. That is a part of their daily activities, even though they're moody, right? Or they may be moody. Not all of them are, but with puberty and everything else, there can be some moodiness. but have they lost that interest or that desire in something that they so deeply had?
Great, thanks so much, Curtis. And you mentioned a few things there that we often talk about in Know the Sign. So giving away prized possessions, so things of financial, sentimental value, those changes in mood, those changes in behavior as well, that withdrawal from activities, that sense of connection and belonging that's so important to all of us. Any other ways that folks can point to, or things folks can point to as signs where that kind of differentiate between kind of quote unquote typical team behavior and when you should be concerned and checking in?
Sometimes the language that a team may use, that all or nothing, black and white thinking, that lends itself to helplessness and hopelessness, like nothing's fun anymore, no one likes me, I can't do anything right, things will never get better, that kind of talk. Those are kind of key words and key phrases that tell you it's more than just having a bad day. There's something deeper going on, something at deeper level, more of like what Emily was talking about, more depression sounding than just sadness.
Great. Yeah, we often kind of highlight that as a critical sign or a crucial sign, is talking about death or suicide, whether that's kind of directly in saying I'm thinking about suicide, or sometimes more likely in ways that aren't as direct, like I just want it all to go away. Or yeah, thank you, Julianne, really appreciate that. Anything else that folks would highlight just as signs that people should be paying attention to?
I think one thing is that depression can look a lot different in children than it does with adults. And you get a lot of irritability, and you get someone who used to be able to do their homework and to reason and problem solve and communicate easily with you. And now they just are really having a hard time. And you just can't figure it out. Like, what is going on? And they don't seem depressed, but they aren't themselves. And so those symptoms can look really different than what you see in an adult.
Great. Thank you, Molly. Yeah, that irritability is something I've heard from a lot of folks. Great. Just to do a slight pause before we move on to the next question. In terms of our speed of talking, Ellie and Raina, can you give us a thumbs up, a medium, or a thumbs down? A so-so. Okay. So just for folks to be aware of that. We talked about some of the warning signs. Now, one that we, again, often get a question about when it comes to trainings is self-harm. So that includes things like cutting. So when somebody's intentionally self-harming themselves. And I say that it's a potential sign because we know that, for some people who are self-harming or cutting, they are thinking about suicide, but for others, they aren't thinking about suicide. So it's not always a sign. But for folks who work with young people, parents, guardians, folks in the schools, other people who are working with young people, does anybody have any guidance about how to approach issues like self-harm with young people?
Well, I'll jump in again. Yeah, to me, I look at that as practicing. And so I think any time of self-harm should be taken very seriously because it can evolve into something bigger. And so for sure, there are times we see people who, let's just take cutting, for example. There's a group of friends that are doing that, and so it's kind of minimized a little bit. But you just don't know that one of those kiddos is going to take it to the next step because they've been desensitized to the small scratch and cutting that they've been doing, and they want to have a little bit more impact. I also always ask parents, or if I'm at the ER, I ask the ER staff, are there cuts, bruises, or scrapes that are trying to be hidden, that are under sleeves and under pant lines. I get really nervous for the kiddos who participate in this soothing, the self-soothing and the self-harm behavior when they really don't want anybody to know about it, the secrecy of that. And so I think it's real important as caregivers and professionals that we talk about that and we ask specific questions about that. Are there any scratches or cuts that you think no one can see that maybe you do with yourself or to yourself?
Great, thanks, Curtis. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? I know that one thing that we think about too is, you know, for folks, you know, who are cutting, sometimes they describe it as, you know, if you think of a pot that's boiling on a stove, you know, and kind of lifting the lid a little bit to release some pressure. So doing that, so it doesn't always have to be related to suicide. Folks have also described it as kind of replacing the physical pain with the emotional pain as well. And so it kind of highlights one of the things that we'll get to in a little bit, which is why it's so important to ask, right? And to talk and to find out more, you know, about what's happening. Anything that folks wanted to add on that particular piece before we move on to the next question?
I've told parents sometimes that if their child is cutting, I don't think they need to immediately go into panic mode. I don't think it necessarily means that the child is suicidal, but it means they're in distress and they've developed a really unhealthy, I'm sorry, Raina.
Oh, that's all right, Emily.
I don't think that cutting necessarily means that a child is suicidal, but it is important to pay attention to because it's a sign that that child is in emotional distress and that they've learned a dysfunctional way of coping with their distress. So I agree with what Curtis was saying. I do think that it's important to take seriously. It's a red flag. But if anybody is listening to this tonight and thinking, oh my God, my kid's been cutting, I think they want to kill themselves, that may not be the case. It's really important to ask.
Great. And I think that's one of the things about a lot of what we're talking about is that, you know, that asking, right, and reaching out and connecting is so important. So young people have a lot of stressors in their lives these days, right? We've come through a pandemic. We're in a pandemic. And so there's a lot of pressures on students. They're navigating a lot of things that really are unique, right, in history in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of pressure. There's two things that I kind of wanted to highlight among those pressures. One is social media, and the other one is academic pressure. So thinking about the social media aspect of it, do folks have any tips or ideas on how they can help young people navigate and create boundaries around social media? Because I think, you know, social media is here, right? And young people are on it. And for a lot of them, it provides that social connection and it provides an important thing in their life. But at the same time, it kind of extends that school day and provides opportunities for harassment and bullying. So thinking about like any kind of words of wisdom or advice or about boundaries and social media and just navigating that in general.
One thing that I find a number of parents find helpful if it works for your family is an app called Bark is one example of a program that can help you simultaneously monitor your teen's phone use for certain trigger words while also giving them privacy. So some parents go through every message, and that can be taxing on you, your time, and can be hard for the young person who wants privacy, who wants to be able to vent without you seeing every word with their friends. But the app is something that will flag certain signal words or items or websites that might have things. So if you're concerned about suicide risk, that might be something you could consider as a family. And it's installed on both the young person's phone and a parent's phone, and it is a subscription to monitor phone use. And then just having some balanced life to try and make sure that young people are also spending time outside or engaged in activities. So it's not that we are not ever on our phones, but just like adults, we also need to think about how we're modeling our own phone use and having a variety of activities in our day.
Great.
Yeah, I would add, I think if you want to know what an adult's priorities and where their heart is, you can look at their checkbook. And if you want to know what a kid or teenager's priorities in their heart is, you can look at what they're looking at online. And I am definitely an advocate, depending on the age, where I think caregivers should be responsible, and it should be an open conversation with their child that I do and will look at what you're looking at. It'd be like if you took them to a movie theater, I don't think you would allow them to walk in any movie that they would want to walk into. You would want to make sure it's safe, and you want to make sure it's appropriate. And again, it's all depending on age and develop the development of the child. I do think that if you start off with these conversations at the very beginning, when the child starts utilizing and using social media, it's a lot easier than trying to go backwards and start setting stronger boundaries. But I am a big advocate, as the grown-up in the house and the keeper of the bills and the internet, that we need to monitor as much as we can, especially younger children, what they're viewing and listening to and putting inside their head and their hearts.
Thanks, Curtis. Anything else that folks would add on that social media piece?
I would add that it's okay to limit what they use and at the age they use it. There's a lot of elementary school kids that are on social media apps, and I think as parents, we have some control over how early they start and when you ease them into it, and setting some parameters for when they use it. Many families disconnect the Wi-Fi at night, so there's some hours around it, set up contracts for agreements. And similar to Curtis, to know that it's a privilege to be able to use a phone and to use social media, and that there needs to be trust set up. And if that's broken, that also can be something that's discussed and maybe relooked at. And really having a hands-on approach. I think sometimes we think when our kids get to be teenagers, we're like, oh, well, I'm going to be more hands-off. And I think we have to be more strategic about how we're hands-on in a way that's respectful, giving them their space, but also still staying involved.
Great, thanks so much, Kim. All right, the next one is academic pressure. So young people are navigating all of these things in their lives, and on top of it, there's that pressure academically. So what are some suggestions for how adults in young people's lives can kind of support them academically, but striking that balance, around kind of academic pressure?
It kind of goes along with the last subject of media, that if the child isn't getting enough sleep, their brain isn't going to work well, and their mental health is going to suffer. So I think the first thing is just general sleep hygiene and eating well is going to help your brain, and it's going to help you be able to do your schoolwork. And then seeking help and assistance through study halls or tutors talking to the teachers, just encouraging the child that they're not the only one who's struggling. Most kids right now are struggling. So, I mean, none of our brains are working the way they did before COVID. Everything is so different. And it's really stressful for everyone. And I think they all think that it's just them and that they're stupid. I hear that a lot. And it's really disheartening to hear your child say that. So you want to give them the tools and support that they can get out of it and realize what the reality is.
Yeah, I love that idea of normalizing that folks are struggling, right? Not only around academics, but it makes people feel more open to reaching out for help. Other things around academic pressure.
So for me, I think it's important to differentiate whether it's academic pressure or whether it's school setting related pressure that the student is feeling. I would say that school related stressors factor into a majority of the evaluations that I perform of youth, but it can be categorized into different areas. So sometimes it is the pressure of the grades. At other times, it's peer-related stressors. At other times, it's a lack of connectedness with the school environment. And I'm thinking of a conversation that I had with a youth not too long ago, where the automatic response to my question, which was how's school going? It was the student said it's not great. In talking a little bit farther, the student has a solid group of peers, feels connected with school staff, and it was solely related to feeling like there was a lack of academic performance. But I think that the other two can go a long way in terms of mitigating that academic pressure. If you feel a sense of connectedness with your school and you have the peer support, the academic stressors might not be as significant as if the other pieces weren't there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Lena. I love that idea of not just being academic, but the importance of having those different supports and that feeling of connection there. Thank you. Anything else on academic pressure that folks want to share?
I'll share that in the high school, we do see some higher risk students who are talking about academic pressure. And some of it has to do with really caring a lot and needing more help and not knowing how to get that support. So I think it's important not to assume that your young person doesn't care. They just might need extra support. And then some of it also has to do with feeling that their parents or guardians are not going to be supportive of them if they can't keep up academically. And so I think communicating unconditional love and support, no matter what the grades are, is really important.
I would add to that what I see with a lot of adolescents is they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves, even if it doesn't show up that way. They're comparing themselves to their friends, their peers, and sometimes they may go the opposite direction when they feel like they can't keep up. And so I think as parents, for us to be able to understand what's driving your child and to be a supportive person to say it's okay, and what do you like about school and how can we help you with that? And you don't need to be excelling in all of this. And especially at the high school level, we see a lot of student pressure on getting into a college and being high achieving, and for us to really be able to support them with where they're at and have it come more from them and not feeling like it's coming from us. And I tie in other things too, like sports expectations and social engagements. It's just a fine line of being able to meet them where they're at and telling them it's okay.
Yeah, so many different pressures to navigate there. And I think that piece about navigating and kind of there are some assumptions that students might know where they need to go in order to get that help. And so, just thinking about, Xylem, what you mentioned there, just about here tonight, we're going to learn a little bit about how to navigate the mental health system, but there are other systems that a lot of us need some support and guidance, and our young people need support and guidance in navigating as well. So we've talked a lot about kind of the signs and some of the pressures. And so when an adult has seen these signs, right, they've seen these signs or they've seen this pressure that young people are experiencing, what are the next steps? What should adults do? How should they reach out effectively to connect with those young people?
Well, I think that this part is very crucial. And I'm a big believer that to find someone who has a connection or relationship with that kiddo is real important. Whether it's a teacher that they specifically have a good relationship with, or a counselor or a coach in the schools. It could be an aunt or an uncle within the family system, but wherever that child really feels comfortable and close with a particular person, I think that's going to be probably one of the most effective strategies and providing a safe environment and kind of to lead off into some of these very, very difficult personal questions. So I do believe that the relationship that child has with somebody is going to be kind of like the lifeline. That's the life preserver being thrown out right there. A lot of times, if it's someone who the child doesn't know, it's just hard to really engage for the child. I mean, put yourself in the child's place. You know, if someone asked me that I didn't know very well how I was doing, what was going on, I'd probably be very reluctant to answer honestly. I just kind of say, fine. But if it was someone that I felt close to, I believe I would be very open with.
Thanks, Curtis. Anything else on that reaching out part?
Reaching out to the school is important. There's a lot of resources there. Calling your pediatrician, calling, like Curtis said, really anyone that you can reach out to that might have another way to try and get to your child. But so many kids failed so many classes throughout COVID through Zoom. And so if they're struggling at school with those stresses, and a lot of kids are, then reach out to the school. They have a lot of resources. That's what we do. That's what we want to help with. And it just won't go away unless you ask for help.
Yeah. And so kind of putting yourself in that caring adult shoes, right? You've seen these signs, you know, what would be that kind of first step that you'd take in reaching out to that young person, or a strategy that any of you have used when you've noticed a student or a young person struggling? What have been kind of those first initial steps to reach out?
Well, I would say it's similar to what we saw in the video at the beginning. It's having a direct conversation and coming from a really heartfelt place to say, hey, I've just been noticing these behaviors. I'm worried about you. I'm wondering, like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Have you thought about suicide? I'm here. I care about you. And I can have a conversation, and not jumping into fix it mode, but really just really having the conversation and being there to listen and to try and understand where they're coming from, and to be that first point of contact. And if you don't know what to do, to know that there are resources available and to reach out. As Molly said, the schools are a great resource, and oftentimes they're also seeing what's going on and can add another perspective and be a support for you, and to know that the school counselors are there to support.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And I think one of the things that we always talk about too is one of the ways that you can show that you care is by mentioning the things that you've seen, you know. So if it's academic pressure, or their grades are slipping, you know, maybe it's that they seem, like Curtis was mentioning earlier, those changes in behavior or those changes in mood, you know, mentioning those things, because I think Kim, like you mentioned, like when you kind of reach out and connect and have that conversation, one of the ways that we can show that we care about that young person is by noticing when things are different, right? And then reaching out and finding out and trying to learn a little bit more about what is going on. So thank you.
I think for adults having that conversation, it can be really hard to hear your young person say that they're thinking of hurting themselves, or that they're thinking of suicide. And to know that going into the conversation and prepare to keep yourself calm and to take care of your own emotions, because you might feel shocked or scared, but you want to stay calm in that moment and try to normalize that this is something that happens for people and that there is help available, and we can take steps together to get you help, and that you're cared for, and that we believe that a lot of people have these moments in time where emotional pain can be really intense, and that we can also get through that, and that you can work together and then get support for yourself as well as for your child to help you through the emotional experience.
Definitely. And so when we think about asking, one of the things that we really focus on is the importance of asking directly. So asking about suicide. Does anybody want to share just why kind of asking directly is so important?
By asking directly, you're letting the young person know it's okay, we can talk about this. This isn't taboo. This is something that has to be kept private. It's okay to talk about it, and you're important, and this is serious. And the research has shown that talking about it directly decreases the chance of a young person actually harming themselves versus not talking about it. So opening up that conversation, getting the dialogue started is really important with really direct and specific language. Are you thinking about taking your life? Are you thinking about suicide?
Great. Thanks so much, Julianne. Anything anybody else wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to follow up what Julianne was saying, is that the person's already thinking about it. It's already in their head. And sometimes the thinking is very distorted and it's very black and white. And to have someone who can help them process and look at that can really help them look at something in a more truthful and honest way with themselves. For example, a lot of times I think children and adults would say they want to end their life. And as they talk about it, a lot of times you can come to an understanding is they just want to end the way their life's going. But they got tripped up on the words, and those words began to give that thought, gave a feeling to that. And then there's a behavior after that. And so we really want to stop the thinking if it's distorted at the very beginning. So talking about it gives a caregiver, gives a professional a place to really help that person set their thoughts straight so they can move forward in a very more honest way of dealing with what's going on with them.
Yeah, and that's a really critical thing. I think for a lot of folks who are struggling with thoughts of suicide, they may have never said that to anybody. They may have never actually said that out loud. So getting that kind of out there in the open, like you said, Curtis, having them actually say that, and then again, kind of what Julianne touched on and Kim touched on too earlier, like opening up, and you touched on, Curtis, like opening up that opportunity for them to share that story and to hear it from their own perspective and not just kind of as an internal dialogue that's happening within. So really appreciate that perspective. What are some resources, thinking about young people, one of their second homes, and sometimes in terms of the amount of time they spend there, their first homes is that school environment. So what are some of the resources that are available through the schools that parents can turn to or guardians can turn to to be able to connect with. So the person, you know, in this example has said, yes, the young person has said, yes, I'm thinking about suicide. What are those resources? What are those next steps in terms of conversation and connection with the school?
I can speak for Tahoe Truckee that your first contact would be your school counselor. That can be a support for you. You may have a strong relationship with your child's teacher, and you can bring your teacher into the conversation as well. But the school counselor can be a resource to talk to you, support your child, as well as get them connected to resources. So within Tahoe Truckee, we have access to therapists, to social workers, and a whole array of community resources that can support you and your child. And that we can be a hub and an access point for that, and to partner with you on it so you don't feel like you're holding all of this alone. And it also helps for the school counselor to know so that they can be a check-in for your child at school, and to really kind of have a different set of eyes and perspective on what's going on during the school day. And so as a team, you can work together to best support your child.
Same with Nevada Joint Union High School District. The counselor is like the point person. They're kind of like a case manager for every student. And so that is the first point of contact if it's a parent or a community member wanting to get help for a student. And then other layers within the school, we have the social workers through the STAR Student Assistance Program, through special education. There are therapists, social workers, school psychologists, and lots of mental health professionals on campus that are like another layer of resource too.
Great. Just being cognizant of time, we are almost at 8. There's a lot of rich ground that we still need to cover. So I apologize. It looks like we may go a little bit later than expected, but I promise for those of you able to stay a little bit longer, it'll be worth it. So just thinking about, you know, one thing that comes up a lot too is particular groups that may need additional support or support that connects with them on a more kind of personal level. And so thinking about our LGBTQ youth, you know, research tells us that they are at higher risk of experiencing thoughts of suicide. And so I just wanted to touch on this and see, you know, kind of, are there specific mental health or suicide prevention related resources in the community or through the school to support our LGBTQ youth?
I can speak to that. So the research shows that yes, suicide risk is higher for LGBTQ plus youth. And also research shows that if there is at least one parent or guardian who is unconditionally supportive and affirming of their identity and their exploration or wherever they're at and whatever they're expressing, that greatly increases the possibility of positive mental health outcomes. So if parents are able to you know, seek support for themselves through PFLAG as a local resource and national resource for parents to get support about understanding their LGBTQ youth. And in each of the schools, there is a GSA, a Gender Sexuality Alliance, which can be a great resource. Again, the school counselor can help connect the student with that resource at the school. In Western Nevada County, there is a Rainbow Social that happens once a month at the Bright Futures for Youth, I think is the current name. And there is also, if there's more of an anonymous need, there is, if you look online, there is the Trevor Project, is an LGBTQ specific suicide prevention hotline. And I can look that up and put that in the chat for folks.
I'm going to put in the chat right now all
Thank
three of the resources that you mentioned there.
Thank you.
Oh, and the Trans Lifeline as well, which
Yes,
is a new resource, which is fantastic. Great. So thank you so much, Xylem. Any other resources that folks wanted to share specifically for the LGBTQ plus community, or any other kind of resources that are supporting groups that may be a little bit more at risk for experiencing thoughts of suicide?
Just wanted to share briefly about the crisis options in Tahoe Truckee, since there's been a lot of talk about the mobile crisis resources that are down in Western Nevada County. And we do have in Tahoe Truckee, we're calling it a hybrid mobile crisis worker who is full-time during normal business hours and is stationed at the emergency department at Tahoe Forest Hospital. So they do the evaluations that come into the emergency department, but they also have the ability to co-respond with law enforcement. So we have done 15 field-based evaluations so far. The way to access that currently is by calling 911 and requesting mobile crisis. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of availability because we do have one crisis worker for our entire region, but that would be the access point to access it, or by taking your youth into the emergency department, where then they'd be able to be evaluated by a crisis worker at the hospital.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And that's a really good segue into our last topic that we're going to discuss before opening it up to any questions that folks have in the audience. And again, you're welcome to put any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will cover that. And that's really, sometimes it's hard to know when we reach out for help what we should expect, or what kind of the system that we're connecting with, what it looks like on the other end. So I just wanted to touch on a few examples, just so folks can get a sense of what does it feel like, what does it look like to reach out and get help for a youth, both from their perspective, but then also from the adult who is supporting them. I want to start first with one that you guys have already talked about a little bit, which is reaching out to a school administrator or a counselor to share concerns or information related to mental health. So when a parent reaches out, let's say they're not sure where to turn to, but they've just had this conversation, or they're concerned about the student, they call the office at the school. From that point forward, kind of what are the steps that they should take, or what does it look like for them to get help at that point?
Well, I'm going to say kind of similar to what I said before, so I don't know if it'll be a new version of it, but like if you were to call your school principal, we have coordinated care teams at each of our sites. And so we are in communication with our administrators, our school counselors, our school psychologists, and we work together as a team to support the student. So they would work closely with the school counselor. Most likely though, they would refer you to talk directly to the school counselor, to set up a time to meet with the counselor and really have a conversation about what's going on, what have you already done to support your child, what can the schools do, and what other resources you may not know about that we could let you know about. But we do work as a coordinated effort to really make sure that if you touch point with anyone at the front office or the principal or the counselor, that we are all in communication and that we work together to be able to support the student. But I will note that we do keep it confidential. And that is, we're not sharing it with every teacher and blasting it out in the school, but that we are really keeping the privacy of the student in mind, but really wanting to be there for the best interest of your child and family.
Right. Thank you so much, Kim.
And I would add that some of the schools are much smaller and don't have a big team like that that's coordinated. And if there's no school counselor, there's no school psychologist, talk to the principal. They're going to know where to direct you.
Great. Thanks, Molly. Anything else on that piece of navigating kind of school? One thing that I think a lot of folks have a question about too is, let's say you are going to access clinical support. So you're going to get therapy for the young person you're working with. Kind of looking at my behavioral health colleagues, but also others, What does it look like to access clinical care for somebody who qualifies for Medi-Cal versus somebody who qualifies for private insurance? What does that process look like?
From the Tahoe Truckee perspective, if someone has Medi-Cal and is in need of services, you can call our county office in Truckee and talk with one of our therapists who will do a screening to determine eligibility. County services are reserved for more chronic conditions and situations. And so therapists will do a screening to determine what level of care would be appropriate. The other option in Tahoe Truckee is Tahoe Forest Hospital has a behavioral health department, and you can access their behavioral health services by calling their office directly or getting a referral from your primary care doctor. And they have behavioral health intensivists who will do evaluations and offer short-term therapy. They also have psychiatry, and then they can offer referrals if longer care is needed.
Thanks,
and down the hill in the Grass Valley area is very similar to what Jasmine's talking about in the Eastern County up in the Tahoe Truckee area. The general practitioners also do referrals to us. The schools do lots of referrals to Children's Behavioral Health. I also collaborate pretty closely with the remote crisis team and the crisis stabilization unit. So if a family goes in for an evaluation or emotional support, I will reach out and follow up for the Medi-Cal recipients and see what kind of service if they requested some, or if they're in need of services as well. But you can walk in, you can call, you can do a referral online. There's several avenues to gain support.
Great, thank you so much, Curtis. And Jasmine for sharing that. And so another question, and kind of again, I'm going to point towards kind of Lena on this one as well as Jasmine. You shared a little bit earlier, Jasmine, about kind of the mobile crisis and what that looks like. So let's say somebody is in need of immediate help. So somebody's having a mental health crisis, and they call 911, the mobile crisis unit, or the youth mobile crisis worker. What does that look like for the young person as they reach out? Or not the young person, but for the adult and for the young person, what does it feel like, or what should they expect as they interact with that type of a crisis response?
I'll let Lena respond to that, since Sierra Mental Wellness Group is in Eastern and Western County.
Thanks, Jasmine. So by the time that us as crisis workers enter the picture, there's already a crisis that is unfolding in some way. There's been identified risk factors. And so one of the things, I'm going to just back up a little bit, but one of the things that I really advocate is creating sort of an emergency preparedness plan for yourself and your child, if possible, before a crisis happens. So, identifying with your child, what are their warning signs? What are their triggers? What are their coping strategies? Who are individuals that they look to for support? And what would they like a crisis intervention to look like? That's not addressing the question at hand, but just wanted to throw that out there. And so a crisis interaction can look a number of different ways, and it really depends on the situation. Either myself or the mobile crisis team can respond to a school site or out in the community where a crisis is taking place. Or it may be more appropriate for that family and that child to come in and meet with us here at the CSU or through the emergency room. But once they get in front of us as crisis workers, what we are assessing for are 5150 criteria. So danger to self criteria, danger to others, or grave disability. And there is a very set number of criteria that somebody has to meet in order for us to put them on an involuntary hold. And thankfully so. Thankfully, there are criteria that we have to meet in order to put somebody on an involuntary hold. But that is a potential outcome for a crisis evaluation. And what that entails is a 72-hour mental health hold, during which us here in the crisis team, we can begin to seek appropriate placement for somebody in a higher level of care, which is typically a psychiatric hospital. The other route that it may go, if either myself or the mobile crisis team is called out, is we will do what we call a safety plan. And the safety plan, I know all of us really try to incorporate the spirit of collaboration, right? We have so many amazing community partners. Some are here on this call, that we partner with on a daily basis to really ensure that that kiddo who is going through the crisis has an adequate number of supports and resources going forward. So, communication with family is very important for any crisis intervention. And again, I would encourage families to have this conversation pre-crisis, if possible, to start the conversation now, so that we can appropriately identify where we need to go when a kiddo is in crisis. It may not necessarily be us as crisis workers, but we are here if need be.
And I would also add, from a Tahoe Truckee perspective, our crisis numbers, about 50% of the evaluations that are done result in a discharge plan with a safety plan. And so it doesn't mean that your kid will be going to the hospital. It means that you're going to be getting the support that you need. And it may be a hospital intervention, or it may be a safety plan for everyone to remain safe at home until we can get through the next day or get linked up with longer term supports.
Great. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. Any additions to that before we open it up for questions from anyone in the attendees? If folks have any questions that you came into this without getting answered so far, and you want to just put those in the chat, or if you want to put those in the Q&A, we'd be happy to answer any of those. In the meantime, any closing thoughts from anybody about we've covered a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time, 13 minutes longer than we anticipated going. But we covered a lot of ground. So any kind of takeaways from all of you from what you've heard that you think for folks who are attending to kind of take with them after this webinar? And this is also a chance for anybody with questions to put them in the chat or Q&A. Well,
Toby, I would add that, we're a pretty small county compared to a lot of other counties in California, but we're mighty, and we have a lot of caring, very caring community members, and very caring professionals, and very caring school staff and admin, and I think we have amazing families too. We're a very unique, I think we're a very unique county, and I think we made a lot of good. We've covered a lot of good ground over the last several years, and trying to minimize and take this scary, ugly, dirty word of depression and anxiety and suicide away, and saying, hey, it's going to be okay. Let people help you. There is help. Let us get in and support you. And so I'm real proud of what we get to do. I'm proud to work with all the community members and partners, including the schools, and proud to work with a lot of the families that I get to work with. So I have a lot of hope, and I have a lot of excitement as we continue to move forward out of this difficult last 3 years. We are a unique county with a lot of unique care. And so I just want to add that piece there.
Great. Thanks so much, Curtis. We had a couple questions in the chat about whether this was going to be recorded, and it is being recorded. And so what we will do in sharing it is We'll record it and then we will upload it to a variety of different places. We'll actually send a link to access the video to everybody who attended tonight or registered for that webinar. We'll put it up on letstalknevadacounty.org, which is a county website. I'll throw that in the chat right here, where folks can access that. And then you can also reach out to me to access it. There's been so many great insights that our panel has shared tonight. And so want to make sure that as many people as possible have access to that. And we're also happy to provide you with the downloaded version. So if schools want to put it on their website or share on their social media, we'll make sure that that's accessible. I think Curtis wrapped it up. Oh, Molly. Yeah.
I would just add, don't give up. If things seem hard and you've been, well, they are hard, and you've been trying and you've gone to different people and asked for help and you haven't gotten what you needed, keep trying and try someone else. Just don't give up.
Great. Thanks so much, Molly. I'm gonna steal something from what Curtis said, which was that we were a small county, but we're a mighty county. We have a number of resources. We have a lot of passionate people who care a lot about the folks in this county, many of whom are on this call tonight. So just a huge thank you to the panelists for being here, for sharing your expertise, to folks who attended. We hope that you got what you were looking for. If not, please reach out and see how we can help all of you. And then also please reach out, be the folks who share the information that you've learned today. I'll follow up with a fact sheet that has some of the signs that we talked about, a lot of the resources that we talked about as well, and then a link to the video. And so please feel free to share that far and wide so we can share this valuable information with as many people as possible. So thank you all for being here. Ooh, I see more happening in the Q&A. I just want to make sure we address it. Extra activities to help the adolescents on suicide. So so thinking about that, are there I think a lot of the resources that we shared you know, are places that we can kind of get folks engaged in. There are, I know at schools, there are a variety of clubs. I know, well, I'll open up to folks. Are there particular activities or resources you would recommend for struggling teens to kind of connect with?
There's one resource we haven't mentioned yet, which is a text line, a crisis text line, because often teens might feel more comfortable texting or they're needing help at night when people are sleeping. So that is 741-741. And that can be a great resource for teens to text to for help.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm going to put another one in here, which is Teen Line. And this is actually suicide prevention hotline and text service that is for teens, and the counselors on the other end are teens as well, who are trained by mental health professionals. So that's another example.
Then Toby, I have a slightly different take when you ask for extra activities.
Yeah, totally.
I think encouraging your child to figure out wherever they're passionate. If it means, if it's sports, if it's gaming, if it's acting, getting plugged in and connecting with peers, and especially plugged into their schools. If they're in the middle or high school, there's clubs. We have wellness centers up in Tahoe, Truckee, and I think we do down the hill as well. But finding ways that they can plug in and get connected and not feel alone is a really big piece of it, as well as having those resources. Because so often I think it's that feeling that nobody understands and I'm in this alone, and realizing that there's other people going through this, and that yeah, you can be part of a community and feel supported.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kim. I love that perspective, and just that the importance of that sense of connection and sense of belonging to something or a group of people, a hobby. Yeah. Somebody mentioned, please provide the contact info and job descriptions for the panel. So if it's okay with the panel, I'll also include the names and where folks work and some contact information in case there are folks from the panel who are interested. Julianne just shared the NJUHSD wellness guide, which is another fantastic resource. And then somebody had asked about survivors, teen survivors of apparent suicide. So there's a group called Friends for Survival, which hosts weekly peer support groups for survivors of loss. So they're open to anybody who's been affected by a suicide, and they're run by people who have been affected by a suicide. And so it's a great kind of first step and resource. They have a variety of different resources and links to kind of a broader network of support for survivors of suicide. So I would recommend checking out Friends for Survival there.
And Toby, I'd add one more resource with the Tahoe Truckee schools. Many of the schools have grief groups. Students have experienced loss and grief in many ways. And many of the schools do groups. And if you let your school counselor know what's going on, they can also connect the student to supports.
And two resources, just in case the student or family aren't feeling able to connect at the school. Up in Tahoe Truckee, there's the Gateway Mountain Center, has a wellness center and mentorships, and in Grass Valley, the Bright Futures for Youth has support groups as well.
Great. And somebody asked for the Friends for Survival, how to connect with them. I put the link to their website in the chat. It's the most recent chat there. And I'll also send out a link to in the email that I send out to everybody about the event with follow-up resources. There will be a link to that, Friends for Survival. All right. I think we've gotten to all of the questions. I'll hang out for a little bit longer. I know we're just in case any other questions trickle in. But again, thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you to everybody who was here. And thank you, Raina, Ellie. Thank you so much for being here, for providing this valuable service. And again, really important resources that we have for the Spanish-speaking community when it comes to knowing the signs and training. So if anybody's interested in a Know the Signs training in English or in Spanish, please reach out and we're happy to accommodate any size group at any point in time as well. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you.